After the September earthquake, the first earthquake, we decided we wanted to run some sort of creative project or projects in the central city, specifically where there was one site where our favorite Mexican restaurant had been demolished, and people were kind of avoiding the central city. I lived in the central, my whole life was in the central city, and we just wanted to run some sort of creative project to spice things up a bit and give people a reason to come back into the central city, because everyone was keeping to the suburbs and just going to the shopping malls and didn't have those sort of spontaneous interactions that a city has. So we ran a couple projects on vacant sites in the early days, and then after the February earthquake, much worse earthquake, 5-6 months on, a lot of people seemed to turn to us and our organization because we had a little bit of momentum and said, please, will you come to our neighborhood and do this, do that, whatever. So we kind of became a go-to organization, I guess. The Pallet Pavilion itself, there were at least 250 volunteers involved in the construction of just that one building. We have a sort of volunteer mailing list of 600 or 700 now at the moment. So yeah, a lot of volunteer support. I've been involved in a lot of community organizations for quite a while, and you always feel a bit bad about asking too much of people. And actually the opposite has been true with Gap Filler organization. I always feel hesitant, oh, do we really need to ask volunteers to help with it? But actually all of the volunteers feel like they're getting more back than what they're actually giving. And so all of the names on the inside are people who donated money.
How much did you raise?
So we raised $80,000, which was we raised more than our target. People just kept giving and giving.
Wow.
So what used to be on this site was a big hotel that actually blocked this whole site, so you couldn't walk through from Victoria Street into Victoria Square. And that came in sometime in the early 80s, that hotel was built. And so we wanted to make a sort of symbolic statement that we liked the fact that there was pedestrian entry into Victoria Square from this side of the city. So we created the arches here on the diagonal to really enhance that, invite pedestrians to walk through, and hopefully get the city planners to think, oh, that's a nice idea, maybe we'll preserve that. So we're trying to have an impact on the longer term development. The local government has been very supportive, and yes, after about 8 months of doing things off our own steam and paying for them out of our own pockets, City Council started funding us. And we actually now, just last week in fact, secured 3 years ongoing funding through the Christchurch City Council, which is great for us. In an environment where there really is a top-down master plan being enacted undemocratically, and whether or not that's necessary, I'll leave that open. But I think it's really important that at least alongside that, there's a sort of grassroots, bottom-up initiatives that are able to have some input.
What projects have been your favorites?
The Dance-O-Mat would have to be one that I'm really happy with. And again, thinking of it as an experiment, something that you learn something from. So we were conceiving some project to encourage people to dance, I don't know, and to provide some of that lost amenity. So we created a dance floor, like a proper sprung foam under dance floor, and put it on a vacant site with speakers and lights, and effectively a jukebox. We salvaged an old laundromat washing machine, so a coin-operated washing machine, but we ripped the guts out of it and waterproofed it and put in an amplifier. And so you put a coin in, and then you plug in your own iPhone or iPod or whatever, and you can play your own music. And a lot of people said, as we were conceiving that project, Christchurch has a reputation for being fairly conservative, and people said, Christchurch, Cantabrians won't dance in public, but they do. And so the project, was meant to be there for a couple months, and it's now been a year and a half. So, and it's been really successful. And because we can count the coins, it's actually our first project that we've been able to track in a sense, and we know that it gets used about 7 hours a day on average, which is incredible. The book exchange, which was one of these really short-term, really cheap projects that's been totally embraced by the neighborhood. It's now been there for 2 years. We have virtually nothing to do with it. Basically, the neighbors maintain it, look after it.
What about the miniature golf?
Yeah, right. So sure. We've started a project that we call Gap Golf, which is actually a cross-city mini golf course. And so this is one hole here, but there's actually 9 holes around the city. It's something kind of positive and fun that they can do.
Okay.
And in the process, you see a lot of the city. One of our big things, we talk about leading by example, where we try relatively small-scale temporary projects. If they don't work, whatever that means, if the public don't embrace them, if they're not as effective as we think they might be, they only need to last a few months, they haven't cost so much money, and you learn something from that. If people do embrace them, they can last a lot longer, or you can do a next version, an improved version, and that way we're kind of prototyping what the future city could be.